For her 38th birthday, my only daughter didn't ask for a new car or a fancy vacation. She looked me right in the eye and told me her one true wish. She said, "Mom, the greatest gift you could possibly give me is to just disappear." So I granted her wish. The very next morning, I emptied every single bank account. I signed a legal document that made my home untouchable, and I packed one small suitcase. I left her nothing. Nothing but a single handwritten letter on the kitchen table. And when she read the words on that paper, she finally understood what she had done. I heard she fell to her knees, begging. But by then, I was already gone. Before I tell you the exact words I wrote in that letter, the words that changed everything forever, I would love to know what city you are listening to this story from. Please let me know in the comments. My home has always been my sanctuary. Not just the four walls and the roof, but the very soil in the garden. My husband, Robert, and I bought this house when we were barely old enough to sign the papers. We painted every room, planted every tree. He used to say the house had good bones. After he passed, I learned that the bones were mine too. Every memory, every laugh, every tear was soaked into the floorboards. It was more than a house. It was the story of my life. I was in the garden, tending to the rose bushes we planted the year our daughter Chloe was born, when I heard her car pull into the driveway. The sound was frantic, the tires crunching the gravel too fast. I wiped the soil from my hands and stood up, a smile ready on my face. But the smile faded when I saw her expression. She slammed the car door, her face a thundercloud. At 38 years old, my daughter could still manage the dramatic flair of a teenager. She stomped across the lawn, not even noticing the prize-winning petunias I had spent weeks cultivating. She threw her purse onto the patio table and sank into a chair. "What is it, sweetheart?" Bad day at work?" she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "A bad life, Mom. My boss is a dinosaur, my apartment is a shoebox, and I just saw another person from my high school post pictures of their vacation home on social media." A vacation home. I can't even afford a vacation. I sat down across from her, pouring her a glass of the iced tea I had just made. Her frustration was a familiar storm, one I had weathered many times. I knew my role was to be the calm harbor, the steady presence until the whines died down. "I'm sorry to hear that, Chloe. You work so hard. That's the problem. I work hard and I have nothing to show for it. I'm stuck. And my birthday is next week, 38. It just feels pathetic." I reached across the table and put my hand on hers. Her skin was cold. 38 is not pathetic. It's a wonderful age. You have so much ahead of you. She pulled her hand away, her eyes narrowing. "That's easy for you to say. You have all this." She gestured around at the house. The half-acre of manicured lawn, the afternoon sun filtering through the old oak tree. "You had everything figured out by the time you were my age." "That's not entirely true," I said softly. "We struggled for years. We went without a lot of things to make this happen. But you did it," she insisted. "You and Dad built something. I'm just renting, drifting. I found a place, Mom. A condo. It's perfect. It has a balcony and a second bedroom I could use as a home office. I could finally feel like a real adult." A genuine smile touched my lips. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Truly. I'm so happy you've found something you love." "There's just one problem," she said, her voice suddenly shifting. It was the tone she used when she was about to ask for something. "Something big. The down payment. It's not huge, but it's more than I have." I listened, my heart beginning to beat a little faster. I knew where this was going. She looked at me then, her eyes wide and pleading. It was the same look she'd given me when she was 10 and wanted a pony. "For my birthday, Mom, it's all I want. Just help me with the down payment. It would change my life. You have the money. You could do it easily." I took a slow breath, choosing my words with care. "Chloe, darling, that is a wonderful dream. But the amount you're talking about, that's not just sitting in a checking account. That's my entire nest egg. It's the money Robert and I saved for 40 years. It's my security, my safety net for the rest of my life. To give that away. Her face hardened, the pleading look vanishing in an instant. It was replaced by a cold, familiar disappointment. So that's it? No? Just like that? It's not that simple. Giving you that money would be irresponsible of me. I wouldn't have anything left for emergencies, for my own future. Unbelievable, she whispered, shaking her head. Your dusty old savings are more important than your only daughter's future. Your comfort is more important than my happiness. That's not fair. Chloe, that's not what I'm saying at all, isn't it? She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the stone patio. It's always the same story with you. You'd rather sit here in your perfect little museum of a house than see me actually succeed at something. I should have known better than to ask. I should have known you didn't really support me. The words were like stones, each one hitting me with a dull, painful thud. I had supported her through 3 failed career changes, paid off her credit card debt twice, and was still paying her car insurance. My support was the very floor she stood on, but she was convinced it was the ceiling holding her down. She grabbed her purse from the table. Don't worry. I won't ask you for anything ever again. She turned and walked away, her back rigid with indignation. I watched her get into her car, the car I made the last payment on just 3 months ago. She slammed the door, and in the sudden silence of the garden, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. I didn't know it then, but that single selfish demand was the beginning of the end. The days that followed were heavy with a silence that felt louder than any argument. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap with a foolish hope, only to find it was just a news alert or a message from a friend. Chloe was an expert at punitive silence. It was a weapon she had honed since childhood, a way of making her disapproval felt across any distance. I knew I had done the right thing, the only responsible thing, but logic is a poor shield against the heartache a mother feels when her own child shuts her out. I tried to keep busy. I weeded the garden with a vengeance. I reorganized the pantry. I even alphabetized my spice rack. Anything to keep my hands moving and my mind from drifting to the cold, hard look in her eyes as she walked away. Part of me, a tired, worn-out part, wanted to call her, to apologize just to break the tension, to restore the peace, even a fragile and artificial one. But I knew what that would mean. It would mean erasing a boundary I had fought so hard to draw. It would mean teaching her, once again, that my no was only a maybe in disguise. Then, on the 3rd day, the silence broke. But it was not with a phone call. It was with a text message, a link to the real estate listing for the condo she wanted. Below it, a single sentence. Guess this will just be someone else's dream. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. Replies that were angry, replies that were pleading, replies that were logical. In the end, I sent nothing. There was nothing to say that she was willing to hear. An hour later, another message came through. It was a picture of a steaming bowl of instant ramen noodles. Dinner. Had to skip groceries this week to save up. Hope you enjoyed your meal. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost comical, yet it still found its mark. I felt a pang of guilt, immediately followed by a wave of anger at myself for feeling guilty. I had cooked a lovely roast chicken, the kind Robert used to love. I had eaten it alone at the large dining room table, the empty chair across from me a silent companion. My meal had not been one of joy. It had been one of solitude. The texts continued for another day. A photo of her friend Brenda, smiling on a beach in Greece, with the caption, "Her parents sent her for her birthday. Must be nice." Each message was a small, calculated jab, designed to wear me down. I felt like I was being slowly eroded, my resolve being washed away by a constant tide of guilt and insinuation. The peace of my home was gone, replaced by the constant vibrating anxiety of waiting for the next digital blow. The climax arrived on a Thursday evening. The phone rang, and her name flashed on the screen. My hand trembled as I answered, my voice softer than I intended. "Chloe? Mom." Her voice was flat, all business. "I've been thinking. I know you don't want to give me the money for the down payment. Fine. I found another way. A sliver of hope pushed through my anxiety. Oh? That's wonderful, sweetie. What did you figure out? The bank will approve the loan, but they want a co-signer. Someone with property. Someone like you. The hope vanished, replaced by a cold dread. Oh, Chloe. No. What do you mean, no? You don't even have to do anything. You just sign a piece of paper. It's a formality. It costs you nothing. It was my turn to scoff. A humorless sound that surprised me. A formality? Chloe, I was a legal secretary for 40 years. I know exactly what co-signing a loan means. It is not a formality. It means I am just as responsible for your mortgage as you are. It means that if you can't make a payment, the bank will come to me. They can put a lien on this house. They can drain my savings. They can take everything. A short, biting laugh came through the phone. Wow. So you automatically assume I'm going to fail? You have that little faith in me? After all this time, you still think I'm just some irresponsible kid. That is not what I am saying. I am saying that it is a tremendous risk for both of us. A mortgage is a 30-year commitment. Life happens. People lose jobs. And people get help from their families. Her voice was rising now, cracking with a furious, self-righteous anger. My God, I am not asking you for a handout. I am asking for a signature. A meaningless signature on a piece of paper so I can finally have a life. And you can't even do that. You can't even do the bare minimum. It is not the bare minimum, I said, my own voice firm. The years of placating her finally falling away. It is the absolute maximum. You are asking me to risk my entire future on your promise. And you won't do it. Of course you won't. Because you don't want me to be happy. You want me to stay stuck, to keep needing you, so you can feel important in your big, empty house. You've been holding me back my entire life. The accusation, so wild and so deeply untrue, stole the breath from my lungs. I had given her everything I could, and in her mind, it was twisted into a cage I had built for her. Chloe, that is a cruel and hateful thing to say. The line went silent for a moment, and I heard her take a ragged breath. It's the truth, she finally spat, her voice thick with venom. You're the reason my life is like this. It's always been you. And then she hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a monotonous, empty sound. I slowly lowered the phone, my hand shaking. The venom in her words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. I looked around my quiet living room, at the photos of a smiling little girl on the mantelpiece, and I felt a crack form in my heart. I thought we had finally hit rock bottom. I thought nothing could be worse than what she had just said. I was wrong. Rock bottom was still a few days away, and it would arrive without any warning at all. For 2 days, I lived in a haze of hurt and confusion. The house, my sanctuary, felt like a museum of a life that was no longer mine. Every photograph on the wall seemed to mock me, a smiling ghost of a mother and a daughter who no longer existed. I replayed that phone call in my head 1,000 times, the venom in Chloe's final words echoing in the silence. Part of me was deeply wounded, but another part, a smaller, colder part, was beginning to grow numb. There is a limit to how much a heart can ache before it starts to build a callus. I still held on to a sliver of hope. Her birthday was on Saturday. Maybe, I thought, maybe the occasion would soften her. Maybe she would realize how cruel she had been and call to apologize. Hope is a stubborn, foolish thing. On Friday afternoon, the day before her birthday, the doorbell rang. My heart hammered against my ribs. I smoothed my apron, took a deep breath, and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. It was her, Chloe. She was just standing there on the porch, her hands in her pockets, her expression unreadable. This is it, I thought. She's come to make things right. I opened the door, a tentative smile on my face. Chloe, I said, my voice filled with a relief that was entirely premature. I'm so glad to see you. She didn't smile back. Can I come in? She asked, her voice flat. Of course, of course. Come in. Can I get you some tea? I just made a fresh pot. No, she said, stepping just inside the entryway but no further. I can't stay long. I came to talk. To clear the air before my birthday tomorrow. The phrase, clear the air, felt like a lifeline. I clung to it. Yes, let's. Please. I led the way into the living room, the room where she took her first steps, the room where we'd opened every Christmas present of her life. I sat on the sofa, but she remained standing, a strange, tense statue by the fireplace. She looked at the photos on the mantelpiece, her own smiling face among them, with an unnerving detachment. I've been so worried, Chloe, I began, my voice trembling slightly. What you said on the phone, it hurt me very deeply. She turned to face me, her eyes empty of any emotion I could recognize. Not anger, not sadness, just a blank, chilling finality. I know, she said. That's what I came to talk about. I've been thinking a lot about what I want. For my birthday. For my life. I waited, my hands clenched in my lap, and I realized I've been going about this all wrong. Asking for money, asking for a signature. It's all so messy. It leaves room for arguments, for feelings. I didn't understand what she meant. What are you saying? She took a breath, a long, slow inhale, as if she were about to dive into deep water. You want to know what I really want for my birthday, Mom? I'll tell you. It's not a check. It's not a condo. It's not even an apology from you. The greatest gift you could possibly give me would be for you to just disappear. The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering like shards of glass. I think my heart actually stopped beating for a second. She continued, her voice calm, rational, as if she were discussing the weather. I mean it. Just leave, vanish, go on a long trip and never come back. That would solve everything. Then I could finally get the house, sell it, and have the money to start my life. That's all this place is, you know. It's not a home. It's just my future, tied up in bricks and your old memories. An asset, and I can't access it until you're gone. I stared at her, at my daughter, the little girl I had rocked to sleep in my arms, the teenager whose broken heart I had mended, the woman who now stood before me, calmly and rationally explaining that my entire existence was a financial inconvenience. It wasn't an outburst of anger. It was a business proposal. And in that moment, as I stared at the daughter I no longer recognized, I knew nothing would ever be the same. And before I tell you what happened in the silence that followed, if my story has moved you in any way so far, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. It lets me know that my voice is being heard. She seemed to take my stunned silence as an agreement, a sign that I was processing her grim logic. She gave a small, brisk nod, as if a deal had been struck. So, just think about it, she said, her voice softening with a terrifying false kindness. It would be a gift for both of us, really. A clean break. You've earned a rest. She turned and walked to the door, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly cavernous room. I didn't try to stop her. I couldn't have spoken if my life depended on it. My throat had closed up, filled with all the love and all the memories she had just declared worthless. She closed the door behind her, the click of the latch unnaturally loud. And for the first time, I didn't feel the pain of her leaving. All I felt was the chilling truth of what she had left behind. An instruction, a wish, and the end of us. After the door clicked shut, I didn't move. I sat on the sofa for a long time, listening to the silence Chloe had left behind. It was a different kind of silence than before. It wasn't heavy with unspoken words or thick with tension. It was a clean, empty silence. A void. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked, each second marking a lifetime passing. I looked at the hands moving, and I realized I wasn't crying. I had expected to shatter, to dissolve into a grief so profound it would sweep me away. But the tears never came. The shock had been a physical blow, leaving me breathless. But as the minutes turned into an hour, that shock began to recede, and it left something cold and hard in its place. It was clarity. A terrible, perfect clarity. For years, I had been looking at my relationship with my daughter through a frosted glass, seeing only the soft, blurry outlines of the mother and child we were supposed to be. I saw the struggles, the arguments, the manipulations, but I always told myself they were just rough patches. Bumps in the road of a deep and abiding love. Chloe's words had not been a bump in the road. They had been a bomb that shattered the frosted glass into a million pieces. And now, for the first time, I could see. I saw the road for what it was. A one-way street. I was the giver, and she was the taker. My love, my time, my resources, my home. They were not gifts to be cherished. They were utilities to be consumed. And my life, my very presence on this earth, was the final utility, the last obstacle between her and what she truly wanted. I stood up and walked through my house, my footsteps echoing. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene. I ran my hand along the dining table where I had hosted every one of her birthday parties. I touched the frame of a photograph of us at the Grand Canyon, a trip I had saved for years to give her. I saw it all now with new eyes. I saw a lifetime of sacrifice, not as acts of love, but as investments in a company that had just declared a cruel and absolute bankruptcy. The pain was there, a deep, tectonic ache beneath the surface. But it was no longer the sharp, pleading pain of a mother whose child has hurt her. It was the dull, final pain of mourning someone who was already gone. The daughter I had raised, the one who held my hand and told me her secrets, had disappeared long ago. I just hadn't been willing to admit it. The woman who walked out of my house today was a stranger wearing her face. And you do not owe a stranger your life. That thought, so simple and so revolutionary, was the turning point. It rose up from the cold place inside me. My husband Robert had always said I had a spine of steel. I had just forgotten where I kept it. For decades, it had been buried under layers of maternal instinct, of wanting to keep the peace, of a desperate, undying hope that my love could somehow fix what was broken in my daughter. Chloe's wish for me to disappear was meant to be the final blow, the ultimate act of erasure. But as the sun went down and darkness filled the rooms, I began to see it differently. It was not a curse. It was a key. She had, in her breathtaking cruelty, given me the one thing I never would have given myself: permission. Permission to stop trying. Permission to stop hoping. Permission to stop setting myself on fire to keep her warm. Permission to finally, after 68 years, put myself first. She wanted me to disappear. A slow, cold smile touched my lips in the darkness. It was the first time I had smiled all day. Fine. I will grant her wish. I will disappear so completely it will be as if I never existed. But I would not be erased. I would not be a victim. I would not fade away into a sad, lonely end. No. If I was going to disappear, I was going to do it on my own terms. I was going to be the author of my own vanishing act. The sun began to rise, its pale light spilling into the silent living room. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about my daughter's happiness. I was thinking about my own. My war was over. My liberation was about to begin. Saturday morning arrived with a cool, clear sky. It was Chloe's birthday. For 37 years, this day had started with me in the kitchen, baking her favorite cinnamon rolls, the warm, sweet smell filling the house. But this morning, there was no flour on the counter, no oven warming the kitchen. There was no grief in the morning light, only purpose. The woman who went to bed last night was a mother in mourning. The woman who woke up this morning was a retired legal secretary with a job to do. I went to the old roll-top desk in the study, a place I hadn't used much since Robert passed. For 40 years, that desk had been my command center. I had managed contracts, organized depositions, and handled the affairs of powerful people. My mind, I discovered, was not rusty at all. It was a well-oiled machine that had simply been left in idle. I switched it back on. My first task was securing the house, not selling it, never selling it. This house was Robert's legacy and my life's work. To sell it would be to let Chloe win, to let her reduce it to a pile of cash just as she had tried to reduce me to an obstacle. No, this house needed to be protected. It needed to become a fortress that she could not breach. I spent an hour online, researching the most reputable property management firms in Asheville. I wasn't looking for the cheapest or the fastest. I was looking for the one with ironclad contracts and 5-star reviews from homeowners. I found one. Their office opened at 9. At 9 o'clock on the dot, I called. The woman who answered was polite but informed me their next available consultation was in 2 weeks. I am a homeowner looking to sign a 1-year management lease. Effective immediately, I said, my voice crisp and professional, the voice I used to use with opposing counsel. I have the deed, the most recent tax assessment, and a full maintenance history ready for your review. I am prepared to sign today. There was a pause. I can have a senior agent at your home by 11, she said, her tone having shifted entirely. Next, the bank. I walked in not as a friendly neighborhood widow, but as a client with a clear objective. I sat down with a personal banker, a young man who looked like he had just started shaving. I explained calmly that I wanted to wire the majority of my life savings to a new account at a different national bank. I also wanted to close the small joint savings account I shared with my daughter. He looked at me with concern. Ma'am, are you sure? Are you being pressured to do this? I met his gaze and gave him a thin, reassuring smile. Young man, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. The only pressure I am under is the pressure of a new adventure beginning. He processed the transfer. As for the joint account, he told me there was a balance of $107.42. I told him to withdraw $102.42 in cash and to leave a balance of $5. A token. A final insulting severance package. My third stop was the public library. I sat at a computer terminal, the quiet hum of the building a comfort. I didn't book a flight. Airports were for people who were in a hurry. I was not running away from something. I was moving towards something. I booked a one-way ticket on the train. A seat in a quiet car, leaving the next morning, heading north. The final destination was a small coastal town in Maine I had always dreamed of visiting. A place Robert and I had a postcard of pinned to a corkboard for 20 years. A place of lighthouses and rocky shores. A place where no one knew my name. By the time I got home, the senior agent from the property firm was 10 minutes early, waiting in his car. He was a sharp, professional man named Mr. Davies. I had everything laid out for him on the dining room table. He walked through the house, impressed by its condition. He reviewed my paperwork, impressed by my organization. We sat and discussed the terms of the contract for an hour. I questioned him on the tenant screening process, the emergency maintenance protocols, the fee structure. This was not a conversation with a grieving mother. This was a negotiation. By the end of it, he shook my hand and called me one of the most prepared homeowners he had ever met. The lease was for 1 year. The rent would be deposited into my new bank account. The house was safe. With everything done, the house felt different. It was no longer my home. It was an asset under management. The last tether was cut. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had fed Chloe her first solid foods. I took out a single sheet of my best cream-colored stationery and a fountain pen. My hand was perfectly steady as I began to write. It was not a long letter. There was no room for anger or sadness. Or explanations. Those things belonged to the woman I used to be. The woman I was now dealt only in facts. The ink dried. I folded the single sheet, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote a single word on the front. Chloe. All the pieces were in place. The plan was set. All that was left was to walk away. My daughter was about to get her birthday wish, and she would soon discover that getting what you want can be the most terrible punishment of all. I woke up before the sun. There was no alarm, just an internal clock that knew this was the day. I moved through the dark, quiet house with a sense of calm purpose. This was not a flight. It was a planned, orderly withdrawal. I made my bed, pulling the quilt up tight, smoothing out every wrinkle. I wiped down the kitchen counters until they gleamed, erasing any trace of my final, solitary cup of tea. These were not the sentimental actions of a woman leaving her home. They were the precise, finishing touches of a professional closing a EI file. The case was over. My worldly possessions had been reduced to a single, small suitcase. For years, I had felt the immense weight of the house, of the memories, of Chloe's endless, heavy expectations. Now, all I had to carry was a 20-pound bag. Inside, I had packed 3 changes of clothes, my favorite book of poetry, a small faded photograph of Robert and me on our honeymoon, and my worn leather gardening gloves. I was not packing for a vacation. I was packing the essential pieces of myself, the parts that had been buried for far too long. There were no photographs of Chloe. Her chapter was closed. At 6 a.m., it was time. I walked into the kitchen, the single white envelope in my hand. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the window, illuminating the polished wood of the table where my family's story had been written, meal by meal, for 40 years. I placed the letter in the exact center of the table. It looked small and insignificant, but I knew it was the most powerful thing in the house. It was not a letter. It was a detonator. A quiet, paper bomb. I took one last look around, not with sadness, but with a strange, cool detachment. The house was beautiful. It was a good house. It would be safe. Mr. Davies would see to that. I walked to the front door, my suitcase rolling silently behind me. I stepped out onto the porch, into the cool morning air. I did not look back. Looking back was for people who had regrets. I had none. I inserted the key into the lock, turned it for the final time, and heard the solid, definitive click of the deadbolt. Then, as arranged, I slipped the key into the mailbox and closed the little metal door. It was done. The taxi I had ordered was waiting at the curb. As we pulled away, I watched the house that held my entire life shrink in the rearview mirror until it was just another house on just another street, and I felt nothing but relief. The train station was quiet at this hour, filled with the sleepy energy of new beginnings. I was anonymous. Just another woman with a suitcase, buying a coffee and a newspaper. No one knew my story. No one knew the chains I had just broken. And when I stepped onto the train and found my seat by the window, I felt a lightness I hadn't known since I was a young girl. The train began to move, slowly at first, then picking up speed. I watched the familiar landscape of my town slide by the window, the parks, the storefronts, the neighborhoods where I had lived and loved. As the city I had called home for 50 years faded into the morning mist, a feeling I hadn't felt in decades washed over me. Peace, true, quiet, uncomplicated peace. My new life was just beginning. And if you believe that it is never too late to start a new chapter for yourself, I would be so grateful if you would comment, "I believe," down below. Seeing your support on this journey gives me incredible strength. I settled back into my seat, the gentle rocking of the train a lullaby of liberation. The sun was fully up now, and I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, letting its warmth fall on my face. For the first time in a long time, the future was not a source of anxiety, but a blank page, an adventure. Miles away, in her cramped apartment, my daughter was just waking up on her 38th birthday. She had no idea about the property management contract. She had no idea about the emptied bank accounts. She had no idea about the single, silent letter waiting for her on a table she had always taken for granted. She was still expecting a gift, still believing her mother would eventually break, as she always had before. And in a way, she was about to get one. The gift of absolute, terrifying silence. While I was watching the rolling hills of Virginia pass by my window, I pictured my daughter, Chloe. I imagined her waking up late on her birthday, around noon, probably with a vague sense of annoyance that I hadn't yet called to grovel or wish her a happy birthday. I pictured her driving over to my house, not with a heart full of remorse, but with a purse full of expectation. She wasn't coming to apologize. She was coming to collect. She had always believed that if she applied enough pressure, I would eventually break. For 38 years, she had been right. I learned later, from my cousin Martha, whom Chloe had called in a blind panic, that my imaginings were not far from the truth. She arrived at the house, humming, strolling up the walkway, as if she owned the place. She put her key in the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again, jiggling it with rising irritation. I had, of course, authorized the property manager to have the locks changed that Saturday afternoon. It was the first small sign that the world she knew had fundamentally shifted. Annoyance quickly curdled into anger. She pulled out her phone to call me, to demand an explanation for this inconvenience. She stabbed at my contact photo on her screen. She listened. And she heard the 3 words that began the unraveling. "This number is no longer in service." She stood on the porch, baffled. She tried again. The same automated message. Now, confusion began to mix with her anger. A flicker of unease. She remembered the spare key, the one hidden under the loose flagstone by the porch steps. With a triumphant little grunt, she retrieved it and unlocked the door. The house was silent, eerily so, and clean. Cleaner than she had ever seen it. There were no signs of my daily life. No newspaper on the coffee table. No half-finished cup of tea in the kitchen. No gardening shoes by the back door. It was sterile. Impersonal. It was a house waiting for someone to live in it. And then she saw it. The single white envelope, placed perfectly in the center of the polished dining room table. Her name on the front, written in my familiar cursive. I can picture her walking towards it, a smirk on her face. She must have thought it was a birthday card, and that inside would be a check, a grand gesture of surrender, my apology for having dared to say no. She probably felt a surge of victory. She tore the envelope open. She pulled out the single sheet of cream-colored stationery, and she read the words that I had so carefully chosen. It was not a long letter. It was not an explanation. It was a mirror, reflecting her own wish back at her. It said, "Dear Chloe, you asked for a gift, to disappear. It is granted. Mom." Martha said that when Chloe called her, she was barely coherent. At first, she thought it was a joke. Chloe had apparently walked through the silent house, calling my name, her voice echoing in the empty rooms. "Okay, Mom, very funny. You made your point. You can come out now." But the only reply was silence. The panic began to set in when she checked her banking app. She opened the joint savings account, the one I had always kept topped up for her emergencies. The balance was $5.00. It was a detail so specific, so petty, that it terrified her more than if it had been empty. An empty account could be a mistake. A $5 balance was a message. This was when the real frenzy began. She started calling everyone. My friends, our relatives, her own friends. "Have you seen my mother? Have you heard from her? She's gone. She's just gone." With each call that was answered with a confused "no," her voice grew higher, thinner, fraying at the edges. The fear, Martha said, quickly gave way to a familiar, ugly rage. Chloe began pacing through the house, ranting out loud to no one. How could she do this? On my birthday, after everything I've been through. She's the most selfish person I have ever known. This is insane. She's probably lost her mind. There was no self-reflection, no glimmer of understanding that these were the consequences of her own actions. In her mind, she was, as always, the victim. I was the cruel, unhinged villain who had abandoned her. She tore through my office, pulling open drawers, searching for what? A will? Bank statements? Some clue that would give her back a sense of control? But I had been a legal secretary for 40 years. I had left nothing behind. My files were gone, my personal documents secured. All she found were empty folders and neat, tidy drawers. The walls were closing in. The financial safety net she had spent her entire adult life taking for granted had been completely and silently removed. She was alone. Truly, utterly alone. I had been more than her mother. I had been her system, her infrastructure, and it was gone. But as her panic reached its peak, I am sure one final greedy thought broke through her fear. The house. The house was still here. It was worth a fortune. Her panic, I'm sure, quickly gave way to a desperate calculation. She had lost the cash, but she still believed she had the ultimate prize. She still believed my home, my sanctuary, belonged to her. It was a lesson she was about to learn the hard way. By Sunday, my train was crossing the border into Pennsylvania. I watched the green, rolling countryside, a landscape completely new to me. With every mile that passed, I felt my old life, my old self, becoming smaller and more distant. The story of what happened that Sunday came to me later, in pieces, from a very apologetic Mr. Davies at the property management company, but I've assembled it in my mind, and I can picture it as clearly as if I had been there myself. After a night of panic and rage, Chloe's desperation had apparently hardened into a kind of greedy resolve. She had lost the battle for my savings, but in her mind, the war was not over. The house, the grand prize, was still in play. I imagine she woke up on Sunday morning with a plan already forming. She would declare me mentally incompetent, a confused old woman who had wandered off. She would get power of attorney. She would seize control of the house. In her story, she was the hero, rescuing her family's legacy from a mother who had lost her senses. She drove to the house with a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer a panicked daughter. She was a businesswoman on a mission to claim her primary asset. But as she turned onto my street, she saw the one thing that could possibly derail her narrative. A large, yellow moving truck was parked at the curb, its back ramp lowered onto the lawn. A family, a man and a woman and their 2 young children, were carrying boxes up the walkway. A little girl's bicycle, bright pink with streamers on the handlebars, lay on the grass. Chloe slammed on the brakes. I can see her, sitting in her car, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her mind refusing to process the scene. This was not just an inconvenience. This was an invasion. She got out of the car and marched towards them, her face a mask of righteous fury. Mr. Davies said the man, whose name was Mark, saw her coming and met her at the edge of the driveway, trying to be neighborly. "Excuse me?" Chloe's voice was sharp, dripping with accusation. "What do you think you're doing? This is my mother's house." Mark, a calm and pleasant man according to his file, just smiled. "Yes, it is. She's a lovely woman. We're the new tenants. My wife and I are so excited. We have a 1-year lease." Chloe let out a short, incredulous laugh. "A lease? That's impossible. My mother she's not well. She's been very confused lately. She would never, ever rent out this house. There has been a terrible mistake. You and your family need to pack up your things and leave." Mark's friendly demeanor began to fade. "Ma'am, I can assure you there is no mistake. Your mother, Beatrice, was perfectly clear and organized. She's one of the sharpest women I've ever met. We signed all the paperwork with her and the property management firm yesterday morning. I don't care what you think you signed." Chloe's voice was rising, attracting the attention of his wife on the porch. "This is my house. This is my inheritance. You are trespassing, and if you are not gone in 1 hour, I am calling the police." That was when Mark decided the conversation was over. "Look," he said, his voice now firm, his patience gone. "I don't want any trouble, but we have a legally binding contract." He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened a file, and held the screen out for her to see. "This is a copy of the lease agreement. And that, right there, is your mother's signature, dated 2 days ago. Our tenancy is legal. If you have a problem, you need to call the number at the bottom of the page. That's the property management company. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a sofa to move." And there it was, my signature. Not the shaky scrawl of a confused old woman. It was my handwriting, clear, strong, and steady. The same signature I had perfected over 40 years of signing legal documents. It was a signature that radiated competence and undeniable intent. In that moment, Chloe's entire fantasy collapsed. The story she had constructed of the senile mother and the heroic daughter was obliterated by a few strokes of a fountain pen. The house was not just occupied, it was legally fortified. It was locked down, and she did not have the key. My serene confrontation was not in a shouting match. It was in my calm, perfect legal signature on a binding contract. My name on that document was my final word. It was the boundary I had spent a lifetime failing to build, finally erected in ironclad ink. And that is a power we all have inside us, the power to sign our own Declaration of Independence. If this story is inspiring you to find your own strength, please consider giving this video a like. It tells me that these stories of resilience matter. Chloe just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the phone screen. The new family went back to their work, moving their lives into the space she had so arrogantly believed was hers. The sound of children's laughter echoed from the backyard where she had once played. A new story was beginning in that house, a story that did not include her. She was locked out, not just from a building, but from the life she had always assumed was her birthright. For the first time, there was no one left to call, no one left to manipulate, and no one left to rescue her from the consequences that were now rushing towards her. As I was finding my new rhythm in a quiet town by the sea, the life I had left behind was unraveling for my daughter. The weeks that followed my departure were, from what I've gathered, a harsh and swift education in the laws of cause and effect. For her entire life, I had been her safety net, silently catching her each time she fell. She never even realized she was falling. All she knew was that the ground was always soft. Now, the net was gone, and the ground was hard. The first domino to fall was the car. The insurance policy, a bill that had always been quietly paid from my account, came due. A notice was sent. Chloe, I imagine, saw the envelope, saw the insurance company's logo, and tossed it on a pile of mail, assuming I would handle it, as I always had. A week later, a final warning arrived. She likely did the same with that one. Reality arrived not in an envelope, but in the form of a tow truck. A neighbor told my cousin Martha about the scene. Chloe came out of her apartment screaming at the driver that there was a mistake, that her mother paid that bill. The man just shrugged, checked the paperwork on his clipboard, and continued hooking her car up. She had to take the bus to work that day. A small indignity, but a public one. The first crack in the facade of her comfortable, subsidized life. Next came the rent. Without my occasional loans to cover her shortfalls, her budget was a fantasy. She was a week late, then two. Her landlord, a man who cared about profit, not excuses, was not as patient as I had been. An eviction notice was taped to her door. A bright pink slip of paper that announced her failure to the entire hallway. The irony was devastating. She had tried to oust me from my home and was now on the verge of being thrown out of her own. The social consequences were just as severe. Her frantic, accusatory calls to our relatives and my friends had not garnered the sympathy she expected. Instead, they had painted a portrait of a greedy, entitled daughter. When she called them again, this time for money or a place to stay, the conversations were short and cool. The well of goodwill, which had been fed by my reputation for years, had run dry. Her friends, the ones she had tried to impress with talk of luxury condos, faded away when they realized there were no more free dinners or weekends at her mother's lovely house. She was on an island of her own making. The true collapse, however, was not financial or social. It was internal. I was told it happened on a Tuesday night. She came home to her cold, silent apartment, the eviction notice a constant, glaring reminder on her door. The car was gone. Her friends weren't answering her texts. She was completely, utterly alone with the consequences of her choices. And in that crushing silence, she found the letter, the single sheet of paper she had probably kept out of pure, spiteful anger. She sat on the floor of her nearly empty living room and read it again. Dear Chloe, you asked for a gift, to disappear. It is granted. Mom. And this time, she finally understood. The tears that came were not the hot, angry tears of a victim. They were the cold, wretched tears of a perpetrator finally comprehending the nature of her crime. She wasn't crying because she was broke or because she was being evicted. She was crying because she finally realized what she had lost. Not the money, not the house, not the safety net. Her mother. She had taken the one source of unconditional love in her life and treated it like a bank account to be drained, an obstacle to be removed. She had looked at a life's worth of love and seen only its cash value, and in her greed, she had destroyed both. The understanding came all at once, a devastating flood of truth. The arrogance that had been her armor for decades finally cracked and fell away, leaving her exposed and shivering in the ruins of the life she had single-handedly demolished. I was told she sank to the floor, clutching that letter, her body shaking with a grief that was 38 years overdue. She had gotten her wish. Her mother was gone. The world was quiet. And it was terrifying. I take no joy in her suffering. I never have. But there are some lessons in this life that cannot be taught. They must be lived. Her world had to fall apart so she could finally, for the first time, see the value of the pieces. And my world had to be rebuilt, far away from the rubble, so that I could finally find my own peace. It has been a year since I stepped onto that train. A full 4 seasons. I have watched the rocky coast of Maine disappear under a blanket of snow and re-emerge in a riot of spring wildflowers. I did not just change my address, I changed my life. I live in a small, sunny apartment that overlooks the harbor. From my window, I can watch the lobster boats go out in the morning and return in the evening. Their rhythm a steady, comforting heartbeat for the town. My days are my own. They are not dictated by the needs or moods or manufactured crises of anyone else. On Mondays, I volunteer at the local library, reading stories to children. Their laughter is a kind of music I had forgotten existed. On Wednesdays, I have coffee with a group of women I've met here. There's a retired teacher, a painter, and a woman who runs a little bookshop on Main Street. We talk about books and politics and the best place to find fresh blueberries. We do not talk about our children's problems. We talk about our own lives, our own ideas, our own futures. I have learned to walk on the beach every single evening, to feel the cold Atlantic water on my bare feet and search for sea glass, worn smooth and beautiful by the relentless churn of the ocean. I think, in a way, I am like that glass. I went through a lifetime of churning, of being thrown against the rocks, and I have come out the other side, not broken, but reshaped, smoother, stronger, with a light of my own. About 6 months ago, a letter arrived. It was forwarded by my cousin Martha. The handwriting was Chloe's. My hands were steady as I opened it. It was 12 pages long. 12 pages of apology, of regret, of a raw and painful self-awareness that I had never believed her capable of. She wrote that she had lost her apartment, that she was working 2 menial jobs, that she was finally in therapy. She wrote that she finally understood that the home she had demanded was not made of bricks, but of the love she had so carelessly thrown away. She did not ask for money. She did not ask me to come home. She only asked for my forgiveness. And in the quiet of my new life, I found that I had already given it to her. I forgave her. But forgiveness and reconciliation are 2 very different things. Forgiveness is for the past. Reconciliation would be about the future, and my future no longer had a place for the dynamic we once shared. I wrote back a short, kind letter. I wished her peace. I wished her healing. And I wished her well, from a distance. The boundary I had built was not a wall of anger. It was a foundation for my own peace, and it was not coming down. I sometimes think about her cruel birthday wish. Disappear. It was meant to be a final, devastating blow, but it turned out to be the greatest gift she ever gave me. She thought she was erasing me, but she was only erasing the version of me that existed solely for her. The mother, the ATM, the safety net. What emerged from that erasure was simply Beatrice, a woman who loves the smell of salt air and the taste of wild blueberries, a woman who is a good friend, a woman who is finally, gloriously, enough for herself. My peace is now my greatest treasure, a home I have built inside myself that no one can ever threaten or take away. My story is my own, but I know I am not alone. There are so many of us who have been made to feel small, who have been taught that our worth is measured only by what we can give to others. Every subscription to this channel feels like a vote of support, a chorus of voices declaring that we all deserve to be the main character in our own lives. Please, subscribe, and help this community of strong voices grow even louder. Your story matters. You matter. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Never forget that true love does not diminish you. It helps you grow. And it is never, ever too late to turn the page and start your own beautiful, triumphant new chapter.